Okay, now let's welcome Matthew. Woohoo! All right. Thank you for sharing with us today, Matthew. Yes, it is. Here you go.
This is going to be weird. I say that honestly because God changed my message on me today. And then he wouldn't let me write notes. Y'all know I like notes. And then honestly, this is the last funny random thing I'm going to tell you he changed. He gave me a new name for the title as I was walking up here. So this message is called Rock'em Sock'em Robots. And there's a humorous explanation for it, but yeah, no, I don't know how to do that.
There it is.
The Rock'em Sock, that looks so wrong. That would hurt.
That's how they do it,
Those robots need Jesus. We'll just be honest. If you've never seen a Rock'em Sock'em robot, it's kind of a twisted toy, but fascinating because of all the little pulleys that put them together. You have to press these little buttons for each fist, and then the name of the game is to hit your opponent's face enough for the head to pop up. I guess he blew a gasket or something, I don't know. It's a robot, it's not like it's dead. You can reset it, it's okay. Eden's giving me eyeballs. Anyway, so anyway, all that to say, I'm going to be taking a very unusual look at Esther because, well, there's such a weird story here that just starts with a mess. And I'm going to start in probably Esther chapter 1, yeah. This whole chapter bugged me for most of my life, I'm not going to lie. I always loved the story of Esther. I never understood why, but there were bits of it that I didn't get. And this whole chapter was one of them. I just thought it was pointless to me from a storyteller's perspective because you never really needed to know why the king was looking for a queen if that was the point of the chapter. So when I started diving into this, God kind of gave me a different perspective, which, he does, which is cool. Oh, that felt so awkward holding it with my right hand, and I realized what I was doing. Anyway, so I'm going to jump into Esther chapter 1, verse 10. I'm just going to kind of jump around a little bit here. So this particular verse in the King James made me laugh quite a bit because it just straight up says the king was, I believe it said he was merry with wine. I thought that was such a poetic and polite way of saying dude was drunk because he was drunk. It was so bad. They were feasting for 7 days. This was one crazy party. It was like he gathered all of the princes of Persia. That's like 127 people in the room. And they split it from men to women. So 127 men in one room, 127 women in another. That's one very long party. I mean, I would get bored after like the first couple hours. I don't know how they did it for 7 days. Sorry, I'm not a party person. I'm just being honest. But the king, in different versions in the, I know a lot of people know him as King Xerxes. But in the King James, again, I like his name because I can't pronounce it. The first 3 letters are A-H-A, so I call him King Aha because he needs some aha moments. He has at least one, which is awesome. But my whole point, I'm like just going into this because it's just funny to me. But in this particular moment, he's drunk, right? This whole scene, this chapter, he's drunk, he's partying. And he decides, let's call for the queen. Like, there's no real information or context as to why he decides this. So I have an imagination. I kind of picture this like, the little 6-year-olds on the playground. My dad's better than your dad. And so like this is like 127 men like bragging on their wives. Mine's better than your wife. And this is the king. He's a prideful man. This guy, he loves himself so much. I swear his favorite picture is probably a mirror. That's the picture I get of this guy the more you read into it. I mean, he has kind of a redemptive arc later, but right now, dude loves his picture. That's just King Aha over here. And so in the context, all of these men are bragging on their wife. This is my picture, my brain. And he decides, well, I'm the king. Mine should be better than everybody's. So he over exaggerates. He just goes into it like, she's so much more beautiful than all of yours. I'll even prove it to you and bring her here. And that didn't go very well, if we're honest. And when we look at, I was looking at some interesting information. Bible scholars and like historians believe that the Persians had like a belief system where married women weren't allowed to be in public. There's a couple things like that, and then there's a significance to why they separated the men and the women at these parties. But as you can imagine, I mean, going into a room full of 127, 28 drunk men by yourself, that doesn't seem fun even for me. I can't imagine what the queen would think. And so naturally, that's against her own, convictions, right? Because this is against her belief system. The king is asking her to go against her own beliefs. So, being the high moral ground that she was standing on, said no. Smart lady, I'm just saying. I still agree with her today, but God liked her because, this is his Bible, and he called her beautiful. The next verse, he says she was beautiful, and it says that the king invited her because she was fair to look at, which again, King James Version, another form of politeness. God was saying she was easy on the eyes, let's be honest. It was funny. So he invites her over here. She says no, and then the word gets back to the king. Now he makes this promise in front of all of his buddies, who again, all of them are drunk as skunks, They just, not the best decision making in that room going on right there. And so I'm looking at this, I'm comparing convictions, personal convictions, and godly counsel, right? So in this moment, the king asks the queen to do something against her conviction. She says no. Good conviction, following that. But then he gets embarrassed because he made that promise in front of like 120 people. And so he gets embarrassed, which turns to anger, and then he turns to his advisors who were in the room with him and asks what we should do. Now, I don't know about you, but a drunk person asking another drunk person for advice is like a stupid person asking for a stupid person to give him advice on how to be smart. That doesn't make a lot of sense. It's just a special kind of moment there. So when we get to, I think it's verse 18, this kind of makes me laugh. His advisors are afraid of women, at least from my perspective, because he's basically talking about if word gets out that she said no to you, or is it 18? Yeah, it's 18. Basically, they're saying if word gets out that the queen said no to you, then other queens, everybody else, all the other women are going to start saying no. And I like this line in the New Living Translation, because there, at the end of the verse, he says, there will be no end to their contempt and anger. What are you doing to these women to make them that angry? I mean, come on. So, like, this is like fear talking. This is drunk fear, and it's hysterical on a number of levels. But after all this, the king takes their advice and eventually decides to pass a decree, which in the Persian culture, that was a pretty big deal because he can't undo his laws. His laws are like permanent once they're made. And so he says that no longer can Queen Vashti be in his sight. In other words, he can never see her again. This was a drunk decision made on the advice of other drunk people. That was really bad counsel. And like, you get to the first verse in chapter 2, instant morning regret. Because in the next chapter, it says when his anger, his wrath was subsided, he began to remember. So eventually he starts remembering what he did. He remembers the choice that he made, and he regrets it. So this is what happens when we follow ungodly counsel, like when you get bad advice from a buddy. And I'm going to tell you, just from personal experience, when you ask somebody your same age for advice, I'm just going to be honest, guys, they're going through the same thing you are, so they probably don't have a lot of great advice on that level. I will tell you, your parents probably have better advice. I mean, they were teenagers once, so they've seen it through to the end, especially when it comes to dating. They are married so like you exist. That kind of points out they know a thing or two about the dating world. I'm just saying. You want advice in that area, talk to mom and dad. They know. But ultimately, this just was a lot of bad decisions in one spot. And it brings me to Proverbs 16:18 I kept finding in this book. And it was essentially pride comes before a fall. And this is a theme you see over and over. And what's even funnier is in this particular book, the whole book Esther, when you see the pride first, like the fall isn't going to be that bad until they take the bad advice that goes with it. So like with the king here, he could have just been mad and he could have not made that decree at all. But taking the bad advice made it worse because now he woke up after being drunk and found out he was getting a divorce. That's a lot of bad advice. And so this results in the hunt for a queen, and this is where we enter Esther. So the reason I bring up the whole Rock'em Sock'em Robots is because a lot of the story is very straight up good versus evil, bad choices versus good choices, and there's like a perfect contrast. And it's kind of weird but funny because you have Haman and Mordecai. You have the king and you have Esther. Like it's like split down the middle, you can see it. And so what I'm looking at is the difference between the advice and what they receive based on their convictions as well as how they follow it. So I can't even remember which chapter it was in, but I'm just probably going to talk from here. Essentially, the king starts looking for a new wife. He picks out all the young women in the land, pulls them in. They go into like these intense like beauty training. I don't know, not beauty. I call it beauty training, but basically I laugh at this. Yeah, seriously, the pageant queen style. That's such a weird way to pick a queen. But what's more bizarre is that they're taking a year of beauty treatments and spa treatments. Like, I mean, I can't say they'd probably be mad about that, but like, to be honest, they'd be kind of being pampered for a year. But when you look at the perspective of the king, it's like he thinks so highly of himself. I'm telling you, he loved himself that much. He was thinking so highly of himself that he was thinking, well, I'm bringing all these peasant girls in. They need to take a year of beautifications before I even see them. That's some serious pride. Dude, I can't imagine a guy like that getting a girlfriend ever. Like, not in the natural way. Let's just... That's like the biggest ego I've ever seen. It's ridiculous, but it's hysterical. And so after all these treatments, all these different beautification processes they go through, they bring these girls to the room where all of the king's jewelry, I guess, that's a question there, but like lots of like gold, stuff like that, and these girls just go at it, and they're just really decking themselves out. And this is where Esther makes a really interesting choice because she takes the advice of one of the king's people. I'm forgetting his exact term, but he knew the king well enough to know what would attract his eye. So this tells us a couple things. Number one, Esther cared about it. She was deciding in that moment, I'm going to be the queen. Worked out for her. But what she was doing was she was looking at what the king liked. She was knowing him, choosing to know something about him to make her efforts get in there a little bit easier, I guess. I phrased that weird, but hopefully it made sense. So she goes in. It doesn't say specifically what she picked, but she chose nothing but what advice she was given. And that made her stand out. Now, there's a couple things, in my opinion, that made her stand out, though. Like, she was a Jew among a bunch of Persians. Y'all, she had God. And God's favor was on her. And I'm going to tell you right now, that makes a difference. You are noticeable, whether you realize it or not, just because Jesus is in you. Sometimes you kind of glow in the dark, not on purpose, but, this is what Jesus does. He just shines. And so this is what Esther goes through. She gets into the palace, and she's been here for like 30 days or so, something like that, without ever having talked to him or see him. Like, she gets married. He throws a party because this king likes the party. He's a party animal king. Just had a flashback from the Madagascar king, the monkey thing that kept doing that annoying song. Yeah, that song just got stuck in my head. Not good. But yeah, he was that kind of party animal. Extensive. And as a result of this party, we just get to know a little bit more about the king, how often he throws parties. The last one resulted in him needing a new wife. This one was the result of him picking a new wife. He just, any excuse to party. And this is something that Esther notices, obviously. She filed that away for a little bit of extra help in the future. But in this time, we get to meet Mordecai and Haman. And this makes me laugh because this is the best example of just straight up disobedience, but civil. I mean, it was appropriate. You have Mordecai refusing to bow to Haman. And this is something that's been going on for a while around here. It says it happened like every day. Haman would go past Mordecai, and he would find him refusing to bow. And the funny thing about this is Haman could have gotten Mordecai thrown in prison for that at any time because it was a decree of the king. You treat him with the same respect as you would the king. Mordecai didn't see respect for Haman, which frustrated him deeply. But instead of responding like an adult and, going to the authority figure, he responded like an angry 4-year-old. Yeah, it's one of those. So, I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but just introducing the dynamic here. So this is another conviction here of Mordecai's. Mordecai has this conviction of his own. He'll bow to his king, but ultimately it's God that he bows to. He ain't going to bow to the right-hand man because he doesn't see him as a godly man. And we've seen already that the king isn't that godly either, so. But, respect is shown where it's due. The thing is, Haman isn't like earning the respect. He's just straight up demanding it. And so it goes against Mordecai's convictions. But because Mordecai's convictions are with God, he's protected. Haman's own pride is what keeps Mordecai okay, like out of prison. It's just wild to me. This guy's so angry about one person disobeying a rule that instead of tattling, he yells at him and fights with him and continues on this path, like creating more strife in his own heart, while Mordecai is just at peace. This is something my mother always used to say, fighting fire with love. It's very disarming. Mordecai didn't have to say a thing. He straight up told them, I'm only going to bow to God and my king. That's it. Haman didn't like that, obviously. And so I'm going to fast forward a little bit more. As we kind of get that little thing going on with Mordecai and Haman, there wasn't an agreement there. They didn't really like each other, obviously. There's some history there. There's reasons. But what we get down to is when Haman decides that he's going to punish Mordecai. Now, he finally decides he can punish him, but he's so angry at Mordecai. It's not just going to be about Mordecai. Instead, he decides, I'm going to hurt him more. This is just vengeful anger, and it's really sad in its own way. But this is the best example of God turning around something that was evil, that was meant for evil. God turned it good, because he's good like that. It's not difficult for God to do that. And this is my favorite part of the story, where it's just straight up trusting God. Just as we heard Jacqueline with Abraham, you could trust God and he'll bring the lamb. In this case, I trust God to keep Esther alive. She got put in a pretty tough situation, obviously. What happened with Haman, the reason he decided that he was going to punish Mordecai more than just hitting Mordecai up, he went after all Jews because he knew that would hurt him more. Simply because Haman, prideful man, only cares about himself. Mordecai, selfless, cares about others, right? This is a godly man again. And so he knows to hurt a godly man, you hurt his people. That is super messed up. But the law that was put in place was pretty intense. Obviously, it's basically was awarding anybody who was willing to kill a Jew with, I think it was like, I did the calculations, it's something like $12 million in American for just killing them. But then they added another incentive that if you did, you could not only get paid for it, but you could take all of their stuff. So naturally, people are going to aim for it. There's a lot of incentive. So this is why Mordecai is so bothered by it, obviously, because that's really hard to deal with. So he goes to Esther. Now, because of where Mordecai was allowed to go, Esther had to send a messenger between them. This was funny, because Mordecai knew that they didn't know Esther was a Jew. So when he tells Esther that she is a Jew and they'll come after her too, that messenger sees that, and then that information is now exposed. And the thing about this, Mordecai didn't do that maliciously when you read it. Like, he did it because he knew that God had a plan. He was trusting God for the lamb, right? And when we go further into this, when we look at what happened with Esther in this bit, this is why I don't press buttons on my phone. Okay, good, it stopped. It was starting to read the Bible to me. Anyway, so I get into this place where Esther receives this message and sees her options. Death or death. Not a lot of great options there, because now everybody knows she's a Jew. She falls prey to this law, right? Her other option is go see the king, which, without being invited, was under penalty of death. So she had the choice between doing nothing and dying or doing something and dying. So, you can imagine why she'd want to get some godly counsel on this. So she sought God out. She had her people fast and pray for 3 days, as well as her family. That was a pretty awesome decision. Like, that was wisdom in the best moment. And when she did this, she sought God. And after this, I've never seen anything about her having fear after that in the book. She walked into that throne room with authority, man. She walked in. She waited patiently for the decision. And I love the VeggieTale version of this, because I can't not see that moment in the VeggieTale format. She walks into the room. They're looking around at each other like, did you invite the queen? No, I didn't invite the queen. And then the king just looks at her with this face and then suddenly goes, that's all right. My Queenie Pooh can visit me anytime she wants. Cheesy nickname, but hysterical and impactful. So he invites her in. In the Bible, he says a lot more than that. He just says, you can ask for anything. If you even ask for half the kingdom, it's yours. Y'all know right there, this king loved her. This was like love at first sight kind of thing. It had to be, because dude's willing to give away half his kingdom to keep this girl happy. I'm just saying. And she invites him to dinner at a feast. The king's favorite thing. I told you she stored that away for later. This was strategy. This wasn't fear. And she invites Haman as well. She was strategic here. This was an ingenious woman, I'm telling you. Because she knew the king's weakness was feasts. She knew Mordecai's weakness was his self-love. She knew his weakness was his pride. And how prideful would somebody get if he could go around telling everybody, I'm eating dinner with the king and the queen. Yeah. And, he did. They go to dinner, and again at dinner, the king asks her again, what do you want? I will give you anything, half the kingdom. Second time he offers her half of his kingdom. And she says, I want you to come to dinner tomorrow. This girl had some serious strategy. Like, she knew the way to this king's heart was through his stomach. And I mean, I've heard a lot of different stories about this, but like, she was a Jewish girl, okay? She knew how to cook. She knew what she was doing when she got him to come to dinner. And again, she invited Haman. And so in this particular day, as Haman leaves, he goes and he invites his wife and his friend. He wants to brag to them and let them know, I had dinner with the king and the queen, and they invited me to dinner again. I'm special. He just like drew a star around himself in the mirror. I'm telling you, like, the way that Haman started acting is reminding me of the way the king was, Just loved himself so much. Which again brings up something my mom always said, you are who you hang with. Hopefully he changed in the end, the king. But yeah, so I got distracted by that one. It was just cracking me up. But after that, he goes and talks to his wife and his friend, right? And he's talking, bragging on himself, so excited about this. And then he realized, but that Mordecai guy, man, like, he still won't bow. This is what the king said. He has to. He's supposed to. Why isn't he listening? Me. Like, come on. He's just like, he's just so fussy. It's just too funny. I don't even have, like, all the words for how many different ways I could describe his fussiness. And his wife, she's such a psychopath. I'm just like, she's like, you know what? You have the king's ear. Why don't you go build a 75-foot tall thing to hang him on? What kind of psychopath decides that that's the answer? Yeah, he won't listen. Okay, let's kill him. I'm still like, that guy, he married someone just like him, I'm telling you. So this is the result. And dude is so upset about this. This is being built right then and there. So in the middle of the night, Haman is still so upset about this. Like, guys, this is seriously what you do to people when you fight fire with love. When they make fun of you and you just kind of like respond with love. Like, I have so many random examples of this. I got called a lot of names growing up, okay? I told this was the first time my mother had told me to fight fire with love, because I had a mouth on me as a kid, okay? If you called me a name, I found 3 more that were 10 times worse. That was me as a kid. I'm not even lying, all right? And this one kid, it was 4th grade. I don't know why I remember this so vividly. It was just the most hysterical thing. Dude cursed at me at school. Like, he called me a couple really, really dark names. And I was trying to remember, like, Bible, like, this was like children's church Bible study, like, fight fire with love. And so I was like, you have a cool shirt. And I walked away. It was so awkward. And every time he walked past me, he would constantly say the worst things to me. And I would just be like, okay, bye. It was the most random thing. And after like half a week of this happening, he decides to stand there and ask me what on earth my problem is, because I'm not a normal person. I'm responding so weird. When you call somebody a name, it's supposed to hurt. And I said, I guess so. I was like, I didn't know how to respond to that. Like, never been yelled at by another child. And as this kid is yelling, like, we're on the playground. His voice is raising. And around the corner comes the recess lady. And this is the first time I learned that detention was a thing. I didn't get detention, but she told him she was taking him to detention. I was like, this school has a detention? I never knew that, but I found out. Like, that was interesting to me. So just a little mini revelation. When you fight fire with love, it frustrates the person fighting with fire. It just drives them crazy, and it's hysterical. Because this is what was happening to Haman. He was just being driven crazy by love. Like, this wasn't just, like, natural, like, I mean, Mordecai wasn't, like, straight up showing him love, but he was also, like, he was being civilized about it. Like, he was telling him, I don't agree with you. What you want me to do is against my beliefs. Nowhere does it say that Mordecai lost his temper or cursed him out or called him some kind of name. He just told him, this is against my beliefs, and this is how I will see it. This is what I will do, and this is what I will not. And Haman's over here like, I can't even pretend swear words over here. Like, it's just so bad. Like, this is his frustration factor. And so out of this, like, Haman wakes up at night. So he's not sleeping. He's so frustrated by this. And so he goes to the king, wanting to know, can I have the pleasure of hanging Mordecai on this giant, like, 75-foot tall platform I made? That's the frustration. That's how crazy he was driven. It was a special moment for him, too, because I tell you, God had the funniest timing. Because that same night, the king couldn't sleep. And I know I skipped over this story a little bit here, because this is where the king is reminded that Mordecai saved his life. There was a plot to kill the king, and Mordecai, I hit the mic, Mordecai warned Esther about it, who warned the king about it, which saved his life, right? And this is something that the king had forgotten. And, you know, because he loves himself so much, he couldn't sleep, and he had somebody reading back the minutes of his day to him to remind him of how awesome he was today and yesterday and last week. That's the equivalent to the evil queen and the talking mirror in Snow White, I believe. Is it Snow White? Sleeping Beauty? I don't know. Weird magical fairy tale stuff. But the king is, in this moment, being reminded of the day that 2 men tried to kill him. That's one way to fall asleep at night, right? Let's remember that people want me dead. And in this story, he hears that Mordecai saved his life. So immediately it reminds him, did I do anything to thank this man? They look through the records. No, I didn't thank anybody. So in this moment, you have fussy Haman over here throwing a temper tantrum, walking through the courtyard to ask the king if he can kill Mordecai. And the king hears him, because, you know, he's throwing a temper tantrum. It's not hard to hear. So he hears him, and he says, who's out there? Who's in the courtyard? He wants to ask their opinion. He doesn't care who it is. He just wants an opinion. So he invites him in. He starts telling him, what do you do? What should I do for someone that I want to honor? And Haman, so self-absorbed he just loves himself so much. Well, who could the king possibly think is worth honoring other than myself? And so he goes off on this, like, I want to be treated by royalty. Put your royal clothes on me, you know. Let me ride on your horse. Like, he doesn't say it this way, but this is what he's thinking. And it's just like this big, long list of everything he wants the king to do for him, because he thinks that he's that awesome. So he hears all this, and then the king's like, that's all amazing. I need you to do me a favor. Do everything that you just said for Mordecai, the guy that saved my life. And Haman's over here like, I imagine his face like just twitching, like trying to pretend to smile, like, sure, I'll do it. It's like that person at work who pretends that they're willing to do whatever the boss says, and every time the boss says, hey, I need you to do this particular task, like, go take out the trash. It's like, okay. it smells bad and you stink and you're making me do it. I don't want to do it, so. That was pretty much how I picture Haman in that moment. I told you, I got an imagination over here. So after this parade, I mean, it was a parade. It was it was Haman's ego. He threw a parade for his enemy. You guys, this is, again, God just turns everything around for your good. I mean, what is it? I think it's Romans 8:2. I might be a little off in there. Right? 22? 28? Okay, see, I knew it was somewhere in there. I had it somewhat right. I had the book. In this verse, he's telling us that God brings all things together for the good of you. I'm butchering this. Yeah. He turns it all around for you is the essential point of it. But when you think about when he says he takes all things, like that means everything in the universe is working together for the good that God is turning around for you. And this is like the epic example of this right here. Mordecai has the worst enemy on the planet, like the world's most annoying bully. He's planning to kill him and ends up throwing him a parade. God has a sense of humor. If you've never believed it, just read some of the things that he does to the evil people. It's hysterical. And so after this parade, he's he's wanting to kill Mordecai so he can go to the next dinner with the king and the queen and be happy about it. Be thrilled. Fresh off of the kill, apparently. That's supposed to make somebody happy. Like I said, psychopath. Not just real. But because he ended up throwing a parade for the person he wanted to kill, you can imagine he's not in the best spirits when he goes to dinner. So he goes to dinner again with the king and queen. And this is where the king finally says it again. Again, he asks Esther, if you, whatever it is you want, I will give it to you. Half the kingdom can be yours. All you got to do is say, I want it. That's it. That's all he said. And again, all she says, this is just fascinating. All she says is that there is a plot against him. There's so many. I read it in the King James. I don't know why. And so my words are very mixed up in my head over here. But as she's asking, she's saying that there's a plot against her entire family, all of her people. And they want her dead. And she says, it would have been fine. I wouldn't have said nothing if we were just being sold into slavery. But this is our lives. We're going to die. The king gets upset because, as I mentioned, he loves this girl. I'm telling you, he's trying to give her half his kingdom. She hasn't even asked for it, and he's tried to give it away 3 times. That's the equivalent of somebody trying to impress somebody, let's be honest. It's like my brother trying to do a cartwheel. Older brother. Sorry, Jordan. I just realized that's going on YouTube. Anyway, yeah, so that's what he's doing. And in this moment, she's asking, I just want to live. And when the king hears about this plot, he gets so upset that he asks her who would dare raise a hand to the queen. I've read this in so many different versions. There's so many different phrases he uses, but all of them are just angry. This is a king, so we can say he was royally angry. He was very upset that someone would threaten his wife. And when she says, she straight up points out Haman and calls him a wicked man. It's this guy thinks she's inviting him over for dinner because she likes him. No, dude, she strategically wanted to destroy you. She invited him over for dinner not once but twice to inflate his ego. So it would be a little more fun to pop that bubble. That is strategy at its finest. I'm telling you, when she sought God for wisdom, she got some really epic wisdom. And so in this moment, the Bible shows us that the king was just so mad that he stood up and walked out. Haman sees this in the king, like, this is the right-hand man. He has seen this guy kill people for walking into the room without being invited, right? Like, this isn't a guy that you make angry. And he saw this guy get so angry, he got up and walked out of the room without a word. If there was ever a moment for a villain to be wetting themselves, that would be it. Like, let's just be honest about it. That would be terrifying. So he is groveling at this point to the queen because he feels like she might have sympathy for him. This guy, he has a plot to kill her entire family. And then when it's turned against him, he's begging for her mercy. Like, come on, guy, bro. Like, no. He's like, at this point, there's different versions again. I read it in like 3 different versions for fun too. This particular point, like they say that basically he was in her lap, like crying, like this guy is sobbing, wanting forgiveness. And that's the moment when the king walks in. Again, the king has fallen head over heels for this girl. And you're sobbing into her lap, asking for forgiveness. That don't look right, bro. Like, he gets so mad at that point. He's like, you would touch her when I'm out of the room? Like, he just laid a finger on her. And the king was like, okay, I'm done with you. And I know somewhere deep down the king probably knew what was actually going on, but the anger level was like above his head at that point. He broke the thermometer. He didn't even get a chance to explain himself. While he was trying, according to the word, a bag was placed over Haman's head, and then they found the big, giant, 75-foot-tall hangy thingy. I know it's called a gallows, but I just can't call it that. It sounds so special. Like, this is just medieval torture. I don't... But they find this, and they don't even know it was built for Mordecai specifically at this point. They say they found it. I don't know if they found out that it was built for Mordecai or not, but they found it, and the king heard it. 5 seconds. He didn't even think about the decision. Just, yep, put him on it. End of game. That was game over for the red robot. Right there. Rock'em sock'em robot. Don't give me that look. You know what I'm talking about. I saw the eyes. But all the way down the list, every time pride hit in this story, it fell. And with this one, like, bro, Haman kept puffing himself up even more and even more. And you realize how much further you get off the ground if you keep lifting yourself up with pride. That's a long fall. It's going to hurt. And I'm sure it did. Let's just be honest. And then it still goes into what happens with the Jews, with all of Esther's family. In the long run, they were given the same opportunity. Essentially, the law, because they could not unwrite the law, they wrote a law to defeat it. This is very carefully worded. Basically, the law that they ended up writing was done by Mordecai and Esther. They were given the authority to write this, and they said that any evil that is done to a Jew can be done back to them. Essentially, if someone came after a Jew, the Jew could go after them and get the same reward. That freed a lot of slaves, too. Like, that was slaves becoming masters. That was like a flip around. That's the whole universe, I'm telling you, coming together for your good. And that was something that was so epic in this because, like, the whole story, you see Esther operating in her convictions. She's trusting God, and everything flipped around for her family. I mean, this is just God's love for his people. And then in the long run, it wasn't even just the Jews who were fighting back. They had the armies of every different province. Like, as I mentioned before, 127 provinces. That's 127 like royal guards and like people who are trained to fighting with the Jews to protect them. That's just so funny to me because there's going to be some kind of terror if you know you want to get this money, you got to go kill a Jew. But then there's a new law that says they can kill you and do the same. And then you see the Jew also has a personal bodyguard. Like, that's just God in a nutshell right there. The enemy comes against you, and God always turns it around. Like, he has no hope in the factor. And then lots of people ended up deciding, you know what, the Jews have it better. So they had a ton of people converting throughout this ungodly kingdom. So a large portion of people ended up following God too. So like this turned out so much better for like the blue side. I'm calling blue versus red because let's just be honest, that's what it was. You got Haman and the king. The king may have switched sides. He's kind of like in the middle. But then you got Mordecai and Esther over here, walking with their convictions that God gave them, following his word, trusting what he has for them. And it worked out so much better for them. They even got more family. Like, that's epic. I mean, this is just the straight across the board, like, contrast the good versus evil, you know? And when you have God on your side, like, the other side never stands a chance. Just like with that kid in elementary. I mean, I probably could have talked to him a little bit more, but I was still learning how to fight fire with love, so my love was very short-worded. Okay, bye. But that was all I could handle at that moment. But as I've gotten older, as I've gotten to see a lot more in the world, I can tell you right now, when you see somebody through God's eyes, when you see the potential, what he sees in them, it's so much easier to love them. You know, like even if somebody is straight up pure evil, that was never the plan God had for their life. Granted, there's some hurt and things that come along the way, and they might have responded in a different light. But God still loves them. I mean, if he can do it, like he made me, he put his love in me, I should be able to do it too, right? And that's what we see in Mordecai. That's what we see in Esther. Like this king was a really messed up person. But she found a way to love him. And that resulted in a whole lot of good. So, just to sum it all up, I don't know if this was short or long, but hey, God was the one who told me I couldn't write notes. This is your fault. In the long run, we find that when you are trusting God, things just always work out for the better. It's just like watching a little flame with absolutely no hope, trying to burn everything around it. And it's just a little flame, right? But with God, like, do you know how easy it is to blow out a flame? I remember this because in 3rd grade, they made me learn to play the recorder. They said you have to blow just hard enough to make it flicker, but not hard enough to make it blow out. I don't know why I remember these random things from grade school, but that's stuck. So as you can imagine, if you got a God who says the world is his footstool and the little flame that's trying to burn out his people right here, that's not going to be hard to blow out. Like, he can just go like this, and it'd probably blow out. It would be so easy. And that's like, that is the enemy against us. Like, it's super easy. Barely an inconvenience. I know, I saw Zach thinking I needed to say that, so I'm going to go ahead and end it here. I do want to pray for you guys. Like, if God has put a conviction on your heart, I want to encourage you, just follow the conviction he gives you. Follow the counsel that he gives you. Sometimes counsel comes through mom and dad. I'm going to be honest. Like, mom and dad know things. My parents were ridiculously smart people in that area. I can't tell you how many times I prayed about something, and my parents would confirm it by accident by telling me about something they read in the Bible. I wasn't even asking for the advice. I just got it, and it confirmed. So all that to say, godly counsel, godly conviction, follow it, you'll never go wrong. So I'm going to pray for y'all. Trust the word. Know that when you're hearing God, you hear him. Well, the Bible says the sheep hear his voice, so I know you hear him. All right. Well, Father, thank you so much for this opportunity that we've had to learn from your word, learn from everything that you have for us. Right now, we just thank you for the wisdom that you have given each and every one of the people in this room, what convictions you've given them to follow, that they know when they hear your voice, that they know what you have for them, they know the plans that you've got them stepping into. And we just thank you for helping them to trust you and to follow that conviction all the way through to see the good and the incredible things that you have for them in the long run. And amen.